Today, we're going to walk through an incredibly personal and complicated story. We've pieced this together from thousands of pages of documents. We're talking emails, texts, legal filings, even personal recordings. It's all about one father's fight to build a case for custody of his daughter, and it really kicks off with his deep-seated feeling of just not being heard. This quote from the father, Luke Bauer, is pretty much the key to understanding this whole situation. It lays out the central conflict, right? Here's a guy who feels like the very way he communicates, a fundamental part of who he is being twisted and used against him in what is, without a doubt, the biggest fight of his life. Okay, so let's set the scene here. We're looking at the case of Luke Bauer. He was a stay-at-home dad, and after a really messy separation, he's now fighting for real, meaningful time with his toddler, Adelaide. And this isn't just about getting a few weekends here and there. For him, it's about saving a relationship that he truly believes is in danger of disappearing. And from his point of view, the stakes just couldn't be any higher. Luke talks about this profound fear that he's being slowly, methodically pushed out of his daughter's life. He's convinced that as she gets older, she's going to need him more and more. And if he doesn't secure that time right now, that connection might be broken for good. This is where all the pieces of his story really come together. You've got a stay-at-home father who, based on his own records, was the main caregiver. On top of that, he's neurodivergent. He has diagnosed autism and ADHD. He believes these diagnoses are being used to basically paint him as an incapable parent, which puts him in this massive uphill battle from the start. So let's get into the first pillar of his actual legal argument. His whole case really starts with this claim. Long before they ever split up, he was Adelaide's primary parent, and his success hinges on being able to prove that history of direct, hands-on care. And he's got the documents to try and prove it. According to his records, Luke says he was there for literally everything. Every single doctor's appointment, managing the really complex care a premature baby needs, meds, special meals, you name it. He says he was the one home with her when she was sick, and he handled all the daily grind. The baths, the diapers, the nap schedules. This quote right here shows just how far back his commitment goes, way before Adelaide was even born. He puts it in all caps, every appointment. He even talks about sitting alone in the car during COVID just to be there for fertility treatments. He's using this to show that his involvement isn't some new thing. It's been his reality all along. And this brings us to what is probably the trickiest part of this whole case, his diagnoses. Luke's position on this is crystal clear. Having autism and ADHD doesn't make him a bad father. What he's arguing is that these labels are being weaponized, used to create a story that he's unstable or incompetent. To get his point across, he uses this analogy. He says, look, parenting isn't like a 9-to-5 desk job. It takes a totally different skill set. And while his neurodivergence might make a traditional office job tough, he says it doesn't get in the way of being a loving, responsive parent. As he puts it, Adelaide is just the nicest boss. Now let's pivot to the second major part of his case. Luke claims that it wasn't just about his role as a parent. He argues the whole relationship dynamic was completely unbalanced, and he alleges there was a long-standing pattern of controlling behavior from his ex-wife, Catherine. This slide, well, it captures a moment from a recorded argument, and it is raw. From Luke's side, you hear him finally pushing back against what he sees as years of manipulation. But from Catherine's side, she feels like she's losing the argument and accuses him of trying to use their child to hurt her. It's just a total communication breakdown, with two people living in completely different realities. This next quote is from that exact same recording. Luke is saying this to Catherine, but it's about her mother's influence on her. He's trying to build this bigger picture that control is a recurring theme, not just in their marriage, but in her wider family dynamics too. And this is where he connects that personal feeling of being controlled directly to the legal fight. He feels like the court system, with all its rules and power plays, has just become another tool to be used against him. He describes himself as being left totally isolated and broke, while she holds all the power. And that brings us to the third big pillar of his case, this profound conviction that the legal system itself, including his own lawyers, completely failed to understand him or fight for him properly. This timeline really shows you just how fast everything fell apart with his second law firm. I mean, we're talking about 2 months, maybe a little more. It goes from him hiring them, to him raising concerns, to the firm just citing a breakdown and pulling out, right before a critical court date, leaving him high and dry. So here's the law firm side of it. In an email, the lawyer, Julia Black, basically says she doesn't want to get into a back and forth, a tit for tat, as she puts it, and she attaches the paperwork to withdraw. This paints a picture of a relationship that's just become unproductive from their point of view. But Luke sees it in a totally different light. He doesn't see it as a simple communication problem. He frames it as a direct attack on his case. He believes they're dropping him because of his communication style, which is tied to his disability. Basically, he thinks they just saw him as too needy. And his feeling of being failed by the system doesn't stop with his lawyers. It extends to the guardian ad litem. That's an official the court appoints to represent the child's best interests. Luke alleges this person wasn't neutral at all, but instead conducted a totally one-sided investigation that just parroted his ex-wife's story without ever looking into his own claims of abuse. Okay, so we've laid out all the problems and all the grievances. So what's the solution? What is Luke actually fighting for? This last section moves away from the past and looks at his concrete proposal for the future. And here it is. This is the actual schedule that Luke put on the table. If you look at it, it's designed so his daughter has frequent, consistent time with both of them. The goal is to make sure she never goes more than a couple of days without seeing either parent, which he argues is absolutely vital for a toddler. So when you do the math on that schedule, it works out to Luke having care of his daughter 57% of the time. And to him, this isn't just some random number he picked out of a hat. He argues it's a fair reflection of the primary caregiver role he says he's always had, a role he's now fighting to keep. And that really brings us to the big, final question that just hangs over this entire case. The legal system is built on procedure, on lawyers telling a clean story, on persuasion. It relies on a certain kind of communication. So for a parent like Luke, who is openly neurodivergent and just communicates differently, is it even possible for them to get a fair hearing, to truly be seen? It's a question that has huge implications for so many other families trying to find their way through the family court system.